Welcome, Madhuja, for this fantastic film. Let me first start with asking you how you came to write the story and the script and to name it Deep6. So we have one reference to Deep6 as a nautical term, which means to get rid of something. And the thing that we're getting rid of course, is Osama bin Laden's body, which immediately gives us a date, May 2nd, 2011. But then there's no other reference to Deep6. So can you tell us a little bit about the conception of the story?
So the story came to me both as a part of our personal experiences of living through our times, which was marked by, I would say, hopeful kind of a left movement in Bengal. But it is not personal in the sense that these are necessarily, all of them are my own experiences, but a kind of a collective experience that one was trying to narrativize, put it into a structure and create something that is watchable over, let's say, for 2 hours or whatever. So it is that kind of, let's say, things that we experienced both personally and as a larger pool of collective memory. Initially I had called the film Smoking Room. And Smoking Room.
Smoking Room, okay.
Yeah, so, and everybody asked me that, and in fact, everybody in the crew, the lead actor, the lead, both the male and the female, and the cinematographer, the music composer, everybody was more experienced than me in filmmaking. So they all asked me, why Smoking Room? So I said, this is this experience, you know, in the airports where you have this sort of a small room where everybody's smoking and you know it's like a death trap, but you enter into it and you are seduced by it and you willingly sort of lend yourself. It is that kind of a, so the lead character, Mitul, for me, was sort of lending herself willingly. Possibly she could have avoided everything at the beginning of the film and you know, we would not have had any film. But that said, that's the story. So Deep6 also came with the idea that something that has been buried in the water, and 6 is a measurement of how low, let's say, the coffin goes. So it is also a kind of a coffin or a buried, something buried, some kind of a secret that you cannot yet let go. It comes from there.
I mean, I think one of the most you're talking about this collective experience of, and you really feel the loss, because there are loss of many things, not only personal loss, but the brother dies of dengue in a city known for several epidemics. The grandmother, of course, is a story of loss from partition, and you know, she constantly goes back to what the big Greater Bengal was. So can you talk a little bit about, and then of course, my most favorite moment of loss is when Orco goes to the publisher, and then we have one of the most famous actors of Bengali cinema, Soumitra Chattopadhyay, for a minute. You know, he's the one who gives him advice, and he's talking about a poem. And of course, this actor, sort of an intellectual, a theater thespian, died soon after this film. So can you talk a little bit about loss?
Yeah. So first is, of course, there are many losses, and our inability to immediately make meaning of them, to be able to live through that. But possibly it is, when you're living through it, it is never easy to make meaning of that, to sort of categorize them in different kinds of ways. And the characters, especially Mitul and Orco, are dealing with that to make meaning of this kind of a loss. So there are a few things. First is, of course, in an obvious way, is 2011, when the left front government was voted out of power,
Right.
and and they kind of vanished into oblivion. And there were moments when the party could not even hold a small rally, and that they could not bring out any procession on the street, that kind of something that they're famous for. There are so much of documentary evidences in films and so on. But there's something more, in the sense that it's a cinematic story. So how do we tell that loss on screen? And what kind of forms, shapes, sounds can they take to tell this story? I mean, it would be different, let's say, if I was writing a piece of a critical note, or I'm doing a graphic story or installation. So the cinematic story requires its own let's say, the mise-en-scene, the sound, the actor. There is a physical, the physical embodiment of that loss. Mitul has to live through that loss. Orco has to live through that loss. So there are of course multiple. Let's say, so how do you tell that story? And how do you tell a story that has been told many times, especially of Bangladesh, let's say,
or the Nakshal,
or the
movement.
Nakshal movement? So it is, I would say, both a narration as well as a comment on the kind of, let's say, when you keep repeating yourself and it doesn't seem to hold any meaning, a kind of a uncritical repetition, as it were. So there are a series, in fact, of let's say the cinema hall, where she's sitting alone and watching a film, which we actually ran a celluloid film in the theater. So it's that loss. It is loss of spaces, of places that are gone, of a city that is changing, of people that are going, and of values that does not seem to. I mean, they have a ghostly present, but they don't seem to have teeth. They don't seem to have a real presence. All the ghosts here are quite weak also, like they may speak a lot, they may make a lot of noise, but they're not effective in any way. So that kind of like a trance-like thing. About the figure, the publisher, actually. And in fact, there are more, like Kollan Chatterjee in the scene where he is delivering a kind of a political, that kind of a street corner, what we call a street kind of a gathering. He's addressing, but there isn't anybody, and he's talking about possible revolution and about Cuba, about the unity of the workers, students.
And this is Shome, who Orco meets in the when he goes to the countryside.
Actually, basically, it's his house. It's in the suburb, peri-urban area. So where also Mitul takes a train and goes. So these two figures, one is the actor who plays Shome, has been a very sort of important figure in Mrinal Sen's films. And so Kollan Chatterjee was used in that sense. All of them seem, or Biplab Chatterjee, all of them seem to, though ironically all of them are Chatterjees, but that aside, Biplab Chatterjee, playing so many role, but also playing villain in popular films, but in race films, and that kind of a reason. But Soumitra was special because when I wrote it, so on that day, let's say, Orco, like the scriptwriter, is really assaulting him, in the sense that first he loses his purse, then somebody is walking around, just pushes him, then he goes to his boss's room where he goes regularly and he suddenly vanishes, and the conversation is also uh, a little sort of weird in the sense that he, being a communist, does not believe in ghosts, but he's seen one, so he doesn't know what to do with it.
Right.
So in that way, so Soumitra seemed to, when I spoke to him, I told him that you are one of the leaders, who was dominating, and when you're gone, you're just gone. There is this absence. And suddenly, it really happened, of course, after 13 years now, it seems that there is a strong left movement that is growing. But it is, in 2011, there was like
a vacuum.
Suddenly, everybody vanished into thin air, and the leaders became unwell, they're sick, they were bedridden, and things like that. And I did, in fact, witness what Shamo says, not exactly in that kind of a spot, but actually at a street crossing. And I was in tears because there was traffic, my car had stopped, and this person was like addressing to nobody, and he was delivering a kind of a sort of a repetitive kind of a political slogan. So those were the triggers, those were the collective experiences. And those are the losses, but also loss of love, I would say. Because
of course.
love and revolution are such important thing when we are students. So that loss of that, that romanticism, that possibility, and that too. So.
So in terms of actually the genre, one of the most compelling things about this film was to me how ordinary and substantial the ghosts are. They're sort of sitting and watching TV. You have a flicker of bluish light. You have that odd, uncanny doll that keeps hanging out to dry. So you have elements, but you explicitly don't. You kind of eschew the horror genre for not even a classic ghost story, right? So, and that was to me one of the things that was both uncomfortable and intriguing about the film. And maybe we'll get to melodrama a little later, but can you talk a little bit about, the ghost story bit of this?
Yeah, so when it was at the story level, not at the script level, the idea was that Mitul is carrying a lot of dead weight. So let's say it does not matter whether they're living or ghosts or whatever, they are as good or as bad as ghosts. It is then, when I wrote, I had a very clear kind of idea about the space that one would create. And I literally took the trouble to sort of find a wallpaper, give it to the art team, and then create a space. Of course, it did help to work with a experienced cinematographer and so on, but because we used really very little light, and of course the digital is created like that so that it can shoot in very low light, but but at the scripting level, one wanted that kind of a, that it is a little spooky, little edgy, but it's like uh, mm, that you get a bit of a goosebump, but nothing more. But I think I am really grateful to the team, because this is easier said than done, because there is an actor, let's say Maya Ghosh. I want to particularly mention her because she's a veteran theater actor, and
Grandmother.
she's also done a book, about her life in the Indian People's Theatre Association, and that kind of a movement that she was part of. She too died after the film was, by the time the film was in the festival circuit. So, and so it is interesting though, therefore, when you're working with a certain team. So there were two kinds of team, I would say. One who immediately seemed to understand. The other is the technical team who are part of the guild, who are part of the, the industrial system and used to recycling certain ideas and material and so on. So there were grave difficulties there, why I ended up actually doing everything. It wasn't by choice, because every time I did something, I knew my payment was not actually going up, but they were saving money, but that's how it was. We learned to sort of live with that ghost, and then suddenly another arrives, then suddenly another arrives.
So one of the surprising things for me about the ghosts was not only the way, they are there in the space and they're watching her, they're watching TV, they're talking with each other, but there is a 19-minute segment where Orco comes up and he's drenched and he wipes his hair, and then he talks to the brother. So it's not, so one way of looking at the ghosts is Mukul's carrying around, Mitul is carrying around this enormous loss, and the ghosts are projections. I mean, that would be the psychoanalyzing way of thinking about it, but we're not allowed that, because Orco comes and then the film takes a break from Mitul, and for 19 minutes we're with him while he gets on the train. So I'm just curious about why that break from Mitul.
Yeah, so my idea of telling the story was that to be able to tell a very strong story about Mitul, we need to tell the other stories. Yeah. The world that haunts her, the world that is around her, the world that she's never at peace with. So it is in fact, it's like if very simple example would be Satyajit Ray's Aparajito. It's the story of the person, but it is also the story of the mothers, the story of the city, and so on. In fact, for a easy and quick example, I had discussed this with my co-editor that this is a possibility. So it is. So Orco's part of the story had to be told to understand what Mitul, what is Mitul's crisis and what is the crisis all about? What is this loss, the loss of revolution, but also the loss of a love story. So that, and both the actors did ask me that why does Orco get to see the ghost?
The ghost,
yeah. So I said that that is this moment, and only moment I would say that if, let's say, if there were no ghosts, if Orco did not see the ghost, then what would happen? Then it is a moment when Mitul really calls Orco back to her house where he has been earlier. It's quite evident, and tell him that there are so many secrets you are not aware of, and you
Right.
will never understand. It is like showing a wound. That's what I told the actors. Like, if you had a, like, maybe you had a burn mark and you call him and you show it to him. It is
Right.
that. It is that. That is one moment that Mitul, lets him into something that he has possibly missed out, which is why he later is asking, have you been to their house? And they've been to their house, but they don't know
They don't know about the
our
Ghosh.
house or mind or her, her entire world. So it is this moment when Mitul is like almost taking a revenge to tell him
tell
that
him.
that you will never know what I have been through, or what why. And that is the moment when the relationship, Orco also realizes that it does not work. There are ghosts in the in the cupboard.
So, I mean, these other stories that surround Mitul, one of the things is it's a very, fits the feminist genre of, Mrinal Sen's Ek Pratidin, centered around, a woman who comes home too late after work and parents worry. So there's a long genre, but I think what I found very interesting here is that it's also a study of masculinity. You have Orko and you have Atish as the current love interest. So, so the feminist take is complicated. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so what I felt that the film and the storytelling can be feminist,
Yeah.
which is my point of view, but Mitul by herself need not be feminist.
No.
Right. So Mitul has to grapple with the complications that life offers. So, and the kind of complications that even theoretically we might have to channelize if we were dealing with, let's say, some anthropological material.
Yeah.
So it's so Mitul by herself, let us say that is attracted to this cute guy in the office, yeah. And but as far as this question of masculinity is concerned, so there are these men, these men in the sense that there's the father, there are his friends, there is the boss, Orco's boss, the publisher. There is Orco himself, who is constantly sort of trying to assert his masculinity, constantly trying to assert himself, or the entire sort of promise of what the left movement, which was very, very masculine for that matter, in our context, assert that, like reminding her again and again of that I trained you, and so on. To which, as opposed to that, Atish, who is supposed to be a Muslim guy, is by himself, has no issues, no problems. He is sort of, he does not even have a issue about holding on to Mitul, or whether, like in the end he says, "Are you going away?" And she says, "No, I'm just sort of going for now." And so then Atish is almost unreal, too good to be true. He's like a rumor, and that's how the film ends. So, yes, so Atish is, I would say, the one flicker of hope in this in the film.
Like a real friend, a
Yeah,
guy who's your friend and lover, and all of
and
that.
many possibilities.
Yeah.
Also, many possibilities of alternative character tropes in cinemas that we have, because when you are making a film, then you have to decide also, like, what is the style and what kind of conversations you're having with
Right.
which filmmakers, and where do you locate yourself as a quote
As a,
unquote
yeah.
artist. So I hope with that, Atish, because we actually shot in Paxakas area,
Yeah.
an area that I am quite familiar with because I lived there for, in fact, 17 years. So it is known to be a Muslim majority area, and so of course my intention was not to underline that there is a masjid, there is a ajan going on, and that's a prayer tone and all that, but it's in terms of authenticity of what the camera records. We did shoot in Paxakas because I know that area. I did not want anything more than
Yeah.
to. It was not necessary. It was important because we've had so many long history of alternative cinema in Bengal with few exceptional Muslim characters, although our state does have one of the largest population of Muslim, and I do not know why. Like. In a normal situation like you and me having a conversation, either of us cannot be Muslim and have the same conversation, excepting we have different names. So in that sense, Atish is both, is like a hope that women would have, or some kind of a desire, and but also I would say a more social kind of a desire and change, because Atish is also so chilled out. He does not
Yes.
seem to have any issues with
Compared to Orco,
compared
who's
to
very
even
stressed out.
Mitul for that matter.
And she's so stressed out. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
So
Yes,
yeah.
that's it. And I thought the Orco's performance was astounding, because you're annoyed with him that he's talking, but then that sympathy he gets from you, as you realize his loss and the way she reacts to his marriage, he's a figure of her. I mean, she's a figure of loss for her. And, so it becomes much more complicated than the first quarrel sets it up to be. And I thought that was, a remarkable part of that
So
film.
thank you very much for that, because the music composer, he could not believe that she was crying after Orco got married. He said, what was all this until this point? I said, yeah, that is precisely
See
the
the
point.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, so it is. How should I put it? To think about Orco, because he's in a way aggressive passive, but when I spoke with the actor who was pretty much, experienced and working in some of the major Hindi films, I actually took him around the places from where Orco could, be coming to the city. So it's basically, let's say, peri-urban space, taking the train every day to come to the city, which is slightly different from Mitul's position.
Yeah.
Mitul's house is again quite different from, let's say, Urja's house. And there are
Yes.
these questions of class, locations, and how you arrive at the city, and the kind of, so there's a particular way in which Urja and Mitul have jobs, but
He
Orco
doesn't.
doesn't, and so on and so forth. So there are these sort of social networks in which they operate. But as far as the actor is concerned, I explained to him. So I said, listen, I don't like him, and but you will have to love him, and you'll have to believe that you have been wronged, and I do not want people to hate him, and I want people to feel sorry for him, because that would be worse to turn Orco into a sort of a sorry figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's not a villain. He's
He's
like,
not, yeah.
like you just feel like telling him, come on,
Yeah.
it's like over, and that's what Mitul is saying. But there's no way until he sees the ghosts appearing, he is ready to accept it. So that I learned also a lot from both from novel writing, but also from Anup Singh, with whom I collaborated in Kissa. So, but like but my descriptions were a little sort of, I suppose, effective, but not like description in a predictable sense. So, in the scene where she cries after she comes to know that Orko is married, is also like as though he's dead. She's struggling to bring in tears, but she cannot. So I had written that it's like a cat moaning, and Tillotama does that. So
Yeah. She
so,
really does.
yeah. So or I had written, that when Atish is touching her hand as though he is looking into a map. So I had written a very detailed script, but with Orco it was very difficult because there was something that was required at a sort of a embodied kind of performance where you need to bring in a kind of a sympathy, because it's very risky kind of. It can get funny, it can get stupid, it can get it's already in a creepy zone. He's a stalker, and
Yeah.
yet you have to sort of, because if Orco is turned into any one of these, then our hope for revolution fails. So
Yes. Orko is the
yeah,
embodiment.
accepting
Yeah.
that long live revolution, but maybe Orco is not the leader. Yeah.
So that actually brings me to the other character, which is Calcutta. And one of the things that Madhuja has done, she had this installation called Route 033. 033 is the city code when you dial Calcutta. And all that disappears in this kind of horizontal movement of the installation that you experience visually and orally. And you have the same sense here because you don't really, know the neighborhoods. You're very immersed. There are times when the camera is just looking at the street and you're not sure what you're looking at. And then Mitul or somebody will come in, like a few seconds later. But there is a way in which we are watching the city and the city emerges, depending on the sense you make of it. So can you talk a little bit about how you shot the city?
So first I had, so these are like secrets of how I worked. So first is I had a list of things that I would not show, like the tourist spots, and that you would immediately recognize Calcutta. Having said that, if it is immediately not recognizable as Calcutta, then how is it recognizable as Calcutta?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
So that is the problem, and it is. So over the years, I try to keep my, sort of researcher and the critical writing part, and I'm not saying they are in oppositional, but the modes of working are different. It is because at the end of the day you have to decide what shot to take, and what you think the camera movement would actually create that kind of a thing that visual, that image, that cinematic journey that you really want. That is something which is a very sort of a difficult decision. So we did a whole lot of, I had a whole lot of list of things which would be part of our experiences, known places like the Park Street or south of Calcutta, but also not necessarily immediately that you know that this is not Calcutta, this is the house, this is Lahabari, this is that.
This is far away. This
Yeah,
is, yeah.
yeah.
Not all
So, so it is how, let's say, Mitul is made to walk,
Yeah.
you know, in these cycles, and but every time she even that, you know, that metro rail and the bridge underneath the metro rail, there are 3 shots, but all of them are 3 different sort of
Shots,
angles
yeah.
and camera point, you know, points, completely different points of view. So it is so these are, there is a purpose in making that, you know, repetition, but repetition in a with variation, because like many good Bengali girls, I was trained in music, and I have done many years of sitar. So one thing that I learned is this creating a musical storytelling structure, in the sense that there is a repetition, but there is a variation, and an unexpected variation. And I try to do that unconsciously. So practically, how is it done? I had complete lists, like let's say that tea shop where Atish and uh, mm, you know, Mitul are sitting and they chat. So that tea stall, we saw one in Chandni area. Then we got, when we went for shooting, um, they said that that was not available, and they gave me a really like a wall and a bench. So that is one, that is the 2 days I had stopped shooting. I said, I want this. So that was one day, and we completely stopped. I said, find me what I want. So I am really happy with the, if you watch it carefully, so at the background there are these television repairing thing, and there are many things going on that creates a depth, that creates a entire sort of media archaeology thing. So I knew exactly the places that I want, although the editing is not structured like that, but these are very specific places, how we shot, although in many instances without permission, especially in the train.
Okay, all right. I would like to ask about sound now that you've taken us there, because I know you did the sound design, and you know, the most annoying part of the sound were the people in the office who were talking. I mean, there is a sense of all these global politics, and you know, there's an endless chatter around her, but it's very incoherent, like our
Yeah.
infosphere. And then there's the television sound, there's the city sound, then there's the instrumentation. So can you talk about the soundscape?
Yeah, precisely, in the sense that it is like a, it is the density of sound. If you are in a smoking room,
Yeah.
you hear the sound, the buzz around you, but at that moment you are alone, and you don't seem to hear and not hear. So again, there's a lot of banter, in the sense that those are specific cases of 2011. Yet, you know, they are either interrupted, or they are uh, you know, they don't make sense, the sentences are incomplete, or they're, you know, being sort of abusive in a friendly way, and so on and so forth. You don't see them also. And so it is a kind of a world that I would say one experiences when one is traveling. In a bus, you hear things. In a marketplace, you hear things. There is a thickness of the sound, you know, but it is not easy to channelize them or make meaning of them. So, but I didn't want music. So many of the sound design actually came to my mind because while we were shooting in the location, exactly that was happening. Although obviously It's not the same sound, but a sound that is recreated.
Okay.
But mm, the references came from the location sound. Like even when Mitul is walking up the stairs and Orco is following this sort of a white kind of a narrow stairway.
Yes.
Sorry. So a phone was ringing,
Right.
and it was really sort of eerie, in that as though someone is calling out, and that became interesting. Or when Shammu was delivering that speech and we were shooting, there was a sports, going around. So
And in the background, you could
background,
hear, yeah.
and so I took those as references, and so it is that buzz that is there, that is sometimes deafening, and and it's really thick, but you can't really all the time distinguish them. As opposed to that, the music is a Mitul's personal zone,
Right.
in a way that is sort of rises. There are this sort of, but it comes in a very, very odd moments, in the sense that, and that is something that I had long conversation with the music composer, especially this, that she has a big meal after the grandmother dies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in a way it's supposed to, perhaps she's supposed to feel free of all her social responsibilities, or what she thinks are keeping her, pulling her back. So, but then of course immediately when she enters home, and she's slightly surprised, but perhaps not. So those come in sort of in, or in the taxi, there is this one moment where you hear the sound. So there, and towards the end, of course.
All right. I think we'll open it up. Yeah.
Hey, so first of all, thank you for such a wonderful film and an enriching discussion. There are a couple of shots where you cut to the fish, and the film also ends with that long sort of sequence of fish moving underwater. So, what was on your mind while you were sort of constructing those scenes? Because towards the end of those two disembodied voices chatting, they also were talking about the ecological disaster and the disappearance of Salt Lake, if I remember correctly.
Thank you very much. The office sequence was especially difficult because the home sequence, it is mostly night, although they are day, but it is a control environment. It's a house that we found and we set it up, but it's a control environment, let's say. Then one knows that in the night sequence you can make it a little dim and you can work around the spookiness. But in that red and yellow kind of environment with so much of light, how do you work on it? So it is they don't disrupt actually, because it's a, how should I put it? It is this, while there's only one thing that disrupts her in the offices, because she's as though she's in a zone, is Atish, who is actually whom you actually see. The others you don't see, and with whom she only has conversation, and it seems like the real person. So it was like, that allowed me to create also the office space as slightly off, that not spooky, but also not real in a way. And the sort of the banter, which is partly to put it into a specific timeline, but also to underline that, let's say we do a lot of banter, but how what can be to ask this question about what is effective. Fish, I am really fond of fish as a symbol because, and I don't like eating fish, but it is because of many reasons. It for me has many resonances. One also being, you know, the fish being a symbol of Wajid Ali Shah, and then it being brought to Wajid Ali Shah arriving, sent, exiled to Bengal, and that entire history. So, and then there are other rituals and other things, and that how we eat, all the ritualistic eating of fish and all that. So, those fishes, they appeared also quite creepy as far as how they move and what you do. So there is a question of environment, especially when we are thinking of the eastern part of Calcutta and the loss of wetlands, but and there's the entire life, which in fact I had written this earlier, around 2017 or something, and I did the installation later. But as we begin to think the kind of environmental crisis that we are in, let's say the cyclones in the last few years, it is, I suddenly, while I was watching this time, I was really thinking that perhaps there was some meaning while I was writing that part of the script, that it is, see, there's something that there may be a list of things that you want to put in a film, but a film is not your, journal article. And in the sense that it has to take a different shape, like a sculpture or like a piece of music, you might want pain, but what is the sound of pain? So there is, of course, we know of words that describe pain, but what is really the sound of pain? So in fact, the music composer who has worked with me worked in my first film, and I would give him very weird, like, it is the sound of if somebody is chopping you. And he would say, what is the sound of somebody chopping you? I said, use a metallic sound, that it's really like, there's some kind of a screeching sound. So it is that kind of abstraction that I am thinking. So it comes from there. It also comes from, frankly, because you're making a film, there are so many variables while you are shooting. Especially on location, and especially with actors, especially with things, especially with 200 people on the set, that it is everything together, and it's quite a miracle, actually. The scenes that work, I sometimes feel that maybe I didn't make it, because it seems quite weird that I thought something, the actor understood, the cinematographer understood, the music also works, like everything works. Is it even possible? So but maybe it's like a good cooking, sometimes it works, sometimes it don't.
Hi Madhuja, I really like the film.
Thank you.
I get Bishnu's point that there is a kind of horizontality to all the spaces. We don't quite get the proper names, right? So they could be anywhere, Calcutta. But I was also overwhelmed by the sheer diversity of localities, and I didn't think of it before. Like Calcutta is really diverse, like in terms of like you just cross a few streets and it's totally different feel. Probably has become more so in the last 30 years. So something like that I wanted to say, I don't know. The other thing is that the sound, what you were calling, what did you say, the grating sound or something like that? That was there often, the very harsh metallic sound. It may be because of the last 30 years of the tremendous construction boom that you guys have become used to that, right? That's part of your daily life. Apichat Pong Virasizakul, his relationship in his films to the ghosts, it's very different from Western ideas of ghosts. it's a very Southeast Asian idea where ghosts can be part of your everyday milieu, right? They don't have to be figurations, they're actually ghosts. So if you think like that, then the boyfriend encountering the ghost makes sense because they're visible to everybody, they're part of the socials. So I was wondering about that. And the other one was, I'm forgetting. Anyway.
Thank you so much for your points that you make, because when I was making this film, I really thought, yes, I mean the plot part was not so difficult because you can write it down, but as a filmmaker, and since I made only an experimental film, this would be my first proper narrative film, I really gave it a thought that where do I locate myself as an artist? Like if I were a painter, what is my style? Or if I were a musician or a composer, what would be my style? I mean, style of course evolves, but where do I locate myself? So if there was any filmmaker that I consciously went into conversation was Apichatpong. Okay. I mean the others, because I really wanted to distance myself from the kind of Kolkata narratives. That part was my conscious decision of the typical Calcutta narratives that we're used to, and of men walking the streets and so on and so forth. So that was I mean it was like a real conversation that I really wanted to be with, because after a great amount of thought I sort of arrived at this idea that people, artists do work in group. They develop and they sort of become what they are as they work with friends. So I created this imaginary friend with Apichatpong, that where do I locate, and which is why I'm not surprised the film was premiered at Busan, and they actually saw it and they thought it was and I wanted it to not be like, in my mind, I don't address a Bengali middle class audience because it does not offer any of the things that they like. At least I try to. So, yes, and you're right. It is very diverse in the sense that like the metro. So, how, and that metro crossing the her veranda, that balcony is actually my cousin's. I saw it in my cousin's house, and we shot it from his house also. Okay. Although the this where she is in the balcony is in a separate space, but the metro is so I found it really odd because I knew this house, and suddenly, like next to the window, the metro, it's a new experience of the city, like the flyovers, it's a new experience of the city, and suddenly the city that you look from a different vantage point. So the way the city now we begin to navigate and look at, and the spaces, pockets that remain, and then they transform, like let's say the graffiti. It's not how Calcutta is recognized, but it was there. All over. Yeah. So it's a this sort of constantly transforming city that, because Calcutta is seen so much as something, that not Calcutta, central Calcutta. So I did have, for practical purposes, that no, not even a tram. I did have a list of, I knew what I didn't want. It was far more difficult of what I want. But yes, we shot across south and west also, in fact, Behala. and that areas also. And so there are pockets that we found. Actually, I'm also very grateful because my assistants, we had a very good script reading session, and I want to say one of the first time when I read out the script, it was actually Trinankul, and because more than the seniors, I wanted to hear the responses of people who are younger to me, like
Yes.
yeah. They actually found many of the spots, like I said, especially where that something falls into her eye. So, like my assistant came running, I found a real nice gully with this
Graffiti.
that graffiti and all, exactly how you said, and so on. So but the house was quite spooky because this house we remodeled, but there were few things that were already there. So again, my assistant said, I found a very strange house with a very strange person. So finally we got this house because the person who lived in that house wanted to be a scriptwriter, and he gave us on a discount.
Oh, no. Great.
So the things that you do to make films.
May I follow up with one question that relates to this? It's interesting that you say that, it's definitely not pitched to a middle class, that knows a certain kind of Calcutta city films. What was really striking to me is that it is a deeply local film, in the sense that, all this buying of fish and the preparing of fish and then buying eggs and the conversation with the grocer, the street dog who waits for you. I mean, these are not, it's not recoded for a global audience, right? There are codes you get and the codes you don't get. So I actually thought, wow, this is also made for a Calcutta audience, right? So my question was, what's your imagined audience for this, and how did you imagine its distribution and release? That may be a very big question, but
I don't know. I hope my producers are listening. But for me, I think an audience that is a younger audience who do a lot of piracy, and they are know different kinds of films. There is something that there is something that I really felt, that there are a whole lot of things in European films, even in American films, that are very local.
Yeah.
Right? But we took the trouble to read up, or more recently Google, and to figure out, what it means. What is a Parisian street, let's say? So I thought, I know that there are some secrets that only a certain kind of audience will know. There are some secrets that only I will know. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. And thank you so much for the wonderful conversation, everybody.